real guy named Reverend Ike. Richard did the scene with the Pointer Sisters, and it was hilarious.
There's a good place in this world for money. Yes, sir. I know where it is. It's right here in my life.
One of Richard's great breakthroughs in this time as a Hollywood actor is an experience that he actually didn't value that much at the time, which is his role starring with Gene Wilder in Silver Streak. He starts off with a very small part, but again, they find that he's so good at improvisation that suddenly there's a new life injected into the film.
In the context of these films, he didn't have a problem tucking it all in and not being the dynamic Richard Pryor we knew from stand-up, but being this other guy, to be the black buddy inside of a buddy movie. He in Hollywood, for most of his film career, are doing this dance where they're trying each other out. They're giving him just enough room, and he's giving them just enough of his attitude, his edge, to still maintain a certain amount of integrity.
He decides to take this movie called Greased Lightning, playing a race car driver, Wendell Scott. And we were in a town called Madison, Georgia, but it had all of the mentality of the real Deep South. And one of the things about Richard is that he always had a commitment to have as many black supporting actors and crew people as possible. So here was an almost all-black crew that Richard had put together, and townspeople were apoplectic. And the sheriff finally called a town meeting. He said, look, y'all, these niggas will be gone in 3 weeks. Do not mess with the money. And calm them down, to a degree.
During the filming of Greased Lightning, Richard records an album which may stand as his most fearless achievement as a comedian, and it shows how far he was taking American comedy.
Bicentennial nigga, I mean, that's the funniest thing in the world, because the bicentennial, 1776 to 1976, was such a moment of patriotism in American society, but a lot of people were asking how far have African Americans come during this time?
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
The celebration of the United States was a white celebration because black people had been marginal throughout most, if not all, of that time. So Richard is acknowledging the time, bicentennial, but he's putting a particular twist on it.
The title track is the stick of dynamite with the slow fuse. What that track does is it says, where did black humor come from? It came from not people trying to entertain people, but it comes from the slave ships. It comes from the person who's on the slave ship rowing and is crying and thinking, yesterday I was a king. And that gap between what you have in your heart, what you have in your soul, your sense of worth as a person, and how erased you've been by America. That gap creates a space for humor. And so he starts thinking about, well, what has America wanted from us as black people? It's wanted us to present ourselves as these minstrel figures who consent to our own servitude, who consent to our own slavery. And the way it ends is with this person who's acting like a kind of minstrel.
They split us all up. Yes, so we took my mom over that way, took my wife that way, took my kids over yonder. I'm just so happy. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do if I don't get 200 more years of this. Lord have mercy. Yes, so I don't know where my old mama is now. She up yonder in that big white folks in the sky. Y'all probably never forgot about me. But I ain't gonna never forget.
It's time for another one.
Another one, huh? Yo!
What are you doing?
You're going to NBC. You're going to do your own special.
I started hanging out at the Comedy Store. That's how I got to meet Letterman and Robin. One night I followed Richard out into the parking lot. He turned to me and said, "What the do you want?" I said, "Well, you do a television special." He said, "Sell it." He got in the car and drove away. That was it.
Network television in the late 1970s was very conservative. Richard Pryor is not conservative by any stretch of the imagination. But even with those challenges, there are still some great skits. Richard Pryor playing the nation's first black president speaks to the fact that in 1977, the idea of a black president was still a joke.
Mr. President. Now, your predecessor, President Carter, now his mother was a nurse before
What was your question about?
My question is not to my question. The question is about your mother, the one with me.
When NBC offered Pryor this variety show, he wanted young, interesting talent, and Paul Mooney was really responsible for putting together that ensemble.
From the first day that America recognized him as a stand-up comic, the critics knew he had something unique. Who else would have the nerve to do Bill Cosby's entire routine?
It was a great crash course in being around genius, but also being around somebody who was so sensitive and so in tune with what made them happy and what made them unhappy that the whole project imploded within 2 months. Anytime there was a censor or any sort of editing, he was just freaking out.
I'm an NBC spokesman, and I will be happy to tell you what Mr. Pryor is saying. Gosh, I'm just pleased this punch to be continuing on as part of the NBC family. They truly understand me.
Listen, he wasn't stupid. He knew when he went on primetime television, his movie pay doubled. His exposure doubled. His whole thing to America, who didn't know him, everybody knew who Richard Pryor was. When he said sell it in the parking lot, he was way ahead of me. He's just thankful somebody asked him. This little can get me on TV, I'm going to do it.
A lot of people said it was canceled, and the show wasn't canceled. We only did 4 shows, and that was our intent because it's hard work trying to do something and people telling you you can't.
Do you really think that some of the guys that you dealt with at NBC, that some of these guys really want to promote racism actively, or is it a subconscious?
I just think it's part of capitalism, is to promote racism.